All right, Nick, thank you for jumping on the podcast today. I really appreciate your time. Wanted to quickly get, some background on you. I mean, obviously I know you're a big Iowa Hawkeye fan. You're from Iowa. Wanted to get some background on you on kind of how you became an Iowa Hawkeye fan and how you became really big into the NFL draft. I mean, that's kind of why you're here today. Would love to get your thoughts on all the Iowa Hawkeyes who are going to be entering the NFL draft this year. And then, obviously we're going to talk a little bit about some of the guys who could be available in next year's draft. Obviously, really respect your opinion about the Broncos and the Hawkeyes. So I'm really glad to have you on here. But wanted to just quickly, tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started in all this.
Well, as a Denver Bronco fan, working over at 247 Sports under CBS, been there for about 3 years now. As you're a Denver Bronco fan as well. The 2011 draft was the first time in a long time that the Broncos were really bad. And I remember, being engaged a lot with that offseason. Are the Broncos looking to go pass rusher like Von Miller? Thank God they did. Are they looking to go a defensive tackle like Marcel Darius out of Alabama? Are they looking at Patrick Peterson, a cornerback? Are they looking at maybe J.J. Watt, who maybe that's the one guy you might say might have been a better pick at two? I wouldn't say that because Von Miller's my dude. But that's kind of where it really started to grow for me. I was a freshman in college at that time, and the internet was really, those forums was really kind of coming of age, and there's a lot of different opinions. So I was a big consumer of that, watching tape, watching football games, and putting my opinions out there and growing year after year. And that kind of blossomed into something where I was writing on blogs and whatnot. And my editor approached me. I was commenting on an article of theirs, and he's like, "Do you write for somebody?" I was like, "No, I do not." And he's like, "Well, you explain it really well. You're concise. You know what you're talking about. Do you want to get paid to do this?" So I was like, "Oh, that wouldn't suck." So jumped on that. Been a Bronco fan for a long time. My family's originally from the Missouri area, so there wasn't the St. Louis side, and there wasn't much of an NFL team. So my dad grew up a Denver Bronco fan, and so that rubbed off on me. As far as college football goes, though, my dad's not really a big college guy. So my grandparents were, though. They were big Iowa Hawkeye fans, so definitely followed them, became a big Iowa Hawkeye fan. My now fiance went to University of Iowa for undergrad and her master's and PhD, and I got my master's at the University of Iowa. I actually work at the University Hospital now, so been a Hawkeye fan for a long time. So it's just kind of a huge consumer / writer fan of all things that are college and NFL football and everything between there.
That's awesome. I think it's pretty cool that Chad kind of found you on just some forums and was, willing to reach out. And I think obviously the Bronco community is much better because of it. I obviously really enjoy reading your stuff and listening to your insightfulness in terms of obviously the Broncos drafting and just in terms of the NFL draft as a whole. So obviously glad to have you on the show. Real quick, before we jump into some football stuff, I just wanted to quickly touch base with you. Do you eat at the Vine very much in Iowa City?
I do every once in a while. I live in I don't guess I should say where I live on the podcast. We're going to be showing up.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
I kind of live close to the Coralville one out here.
Okay.
So I've been there before, but that's definitely not my place of choice. I'm definitely a consumer of craft beer. So if I get a chance, I'm going to be at Big Grove or Mosley's or 30 Hop or something like that, where I can get either a barrel aged stout or a nice, what do you want? A double IPA, something like that.
Makes sense. Yeah. Sorry. I don't get to go to Iowa City a ton anymore. So the Vine is kind of I love the wings there, but the craft beer scene has obviously grown a ton in Iowa and Iowa City specifically. So have to check that out next time I'm back, hoping to get to a game next year. So.
Yeah, no, man, it's going to be a tough season next year. Obviously, we're going to talk about that here over the next few podcasts, but the attrition is going to be something to watch because pretty much every single borderline guy that, will they stay, will they go? They all went to the NFL, and I'm personally, I'll say this now, I'm of the mindset of if you have a chance to go make money doing this, go do it because it's not a given.
Oh, I 100% agree. That was actually, that was the first thing I wanted to touch with you on is that there are 4 underclassmen that declared. That is a record for Iowa, under Kirk Ferentz in general. And, I want to talk to you about what your thoughts were, whether it was more about the state of the program. I mean, Iowa isn't known for producing players that quickly. I think it's, they really believe in the fundamental process of developing players. And when they get to that senior season, they are fully developed football player. Look at, Brandon Scherf is a great example. Potentially a low round draft pick as a junior stays in, and comes out as a senior, and he is the number 4 overall draft pick. Or though, and that's a long tangent, or is it more about the state of the NFL? I mean, if you have the opportunity to get paid, you need to go do it right now and then hopefully get that second contract even sooner. And I think that's really what we're seeing a lot with football players in general, and then specifically is starting to impact the Iowa Hawkeyes. So kind of a lot of big losses, losing your two starting tight ends, Anthony Nelson, and obviously Amani Hooker, the defensive back of the year for the Big Ten. So let's real quick jump into Anthony Nelson. I think this guy is probably the guy we thought was probably going to leave anyways. He kind of grew up with that defensive line. He's already graduated. He's a redshirt junior. Not a lot more he can accomplish. I feel like personally his floor is really high, but his ceiling also wasn't. There wasn't much more to his ceiling. So I don't know what else he possibly could have accomplished in collegiate football. What are your thoughts on his declaration and kind of where he stands as a prospect?
Anthony Nelson is a guy that I wasn't sure he would declare, but it makes sense because how much better was he going to get as far as his tool set? He wasn't a guy who was just, oozing athletic talent, bend, as whatnot, as far as, NFL draft is concerned. But he was a very technical pass rusher, very stout at setting the edge, and just really advanced with as far as his hand technique, his ability to get off blocks, use that length. I think he measured today with his length at like 34 inches and 7/8 as far as his arm length down in Mobile. Yeah, he's a tree. There's no doubt about it. So he's a long dude. I do think that he'll probably be a guy out of these three. He'd probably be the one that I would take the latest. And that has nothing to do, with his talent, but it has more to do with his fit. And he is a guy where I think he's pretty much a standard 7 technique in a 4-3 scheme. He's not a guy that you're going to want dropping into coverage. He's not somebody that I would see, based on his height especially, dropping, playing 5 technique, 3 technique, and more of a sub package. So he's a little bit more scheme specific. And I think that lowers his value a little bit. I mean, the NFL is getting smaller, lighter, faster. I mean, you're seeing these smaller edge rushers go earlier and earlier in the draft. So he's going to be a guy who comes in. I think he's going to produce right away. How high is the ceiling? How much better is he going to get? That's a question. I think he'll be picked just outside of the top 100 because this is such a top-heavy defensive line and edge class. I mean, everybody's already talking about it. I wouldn't be surprised to see if half of the first 10 picks in the NFL draft are defensive line or edge rushers, maybe even higher than that. So I think he's going to get knocked down a little bit just because the way this class is shaping up, but he's going to come in. He's going to be a good player for a long time. And I don't blame him for leaving. It would have been nice to have him back because the defensive line depth of the Hawkeyes is really taking a hit. And that's something that that was one of the reasons the defense was so dominant last year. But he's going to be a good player. I don't know how loose his hips are. Sometimes he's a little bit stiff. How quickly can he chase a guy in pursuit that can get outside? He's really good at setting that edge, but if somebody even bounces it outside, I'm not sure if he's athletic enough to get there. And if you're playing in a 3-4 scheme, especially in base, where sometimes those edge rushers have to drop back, play some man coverage, I think that's really not going to be his game. So I think those limitations do limit his fit in the NFL and how high a team will take him. But as a rotational guy, especially as a base edge in a 4-3 strong side defensive end, I think he's got good potential and he's going to be a good player for a while.
Absolutely. And I think we kind of hit on a couple of things there. He's the kind of guy that, if he goes, outside of the top 100, he maybe goes mid 4th round, right? He's the kind of guy, though, that I feel like could step in and start for the right team right away. He's not going to, fill up the stat sheet, obviously, but he could be that guy in a 4-3 scheme. And, kind of reminds me of a good fit would be a Denver Broncos type fit. I mean, playing in that 4-3 defense, they're not exactly asked to rush the passer as much as they are to fill up the blockers and allow Von Miller and Bradley Chubb to do a lot of the pass rushing. What are your thoughts on that as a potential fit?
I think he's more of an edge in the NFL. So I don't want him inside playing that Derek Wolfe role or that Adam Gotsis role. I don't think that's his best. And he does have actually surprising bend around the edge for that. But a team that runs a basic 4-3 front, and looking for maybe another depth edge rusher, such as, maybe the Chargers. Another good fit would be kind of like the Browns. They run that 4-3 front. That would make a lot of sense. But there's a lot of teams that could take him. I think Denver, though, he doesn't really have the pure speed that you want for that 3-4 edge that Denver deploys. But that being said, the NFL is changing, kind of like the Hawkeyes are changing. I mean, Iowa was a 4-3 defensive front for a long time, and this year we saw them finally make the change to be more 4-2-5 with Hooker playing that star role, as they called it, instead of a linebacker. So you're going to have more 4-man fronts if you're playing that 4-2-5 in the NFL, more sub packages, more than ever, more wide receivers out there, obviously. So I could see him in there, especially as a rotational piece. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that you want as your primary starting edge rusher in the NFL just because he lacks the elite burst, the elite get off. But I think that especially with his just how solid he is against the run as well, there's going to be a fit for him. I'm really interested though to see how he tests at the combine. Stuff like the 3-cone drill, the 20-yard shuttle, the 10-yard dash out of the 40-yard dash. Those will all be big for him in helping sort out some of this class. I do think though that, you know, listening to him talk in interviews or hearing some people talk about him, he's going to interview very well as well. So team's going to fall in love with him. How high is his ceiling? That's the question. Is he ever going to be a starter caliber guy in the NFL? I don't think so, but granted, I look more for as a Denver Bronco analyst, I look more for a 3-4 type of edge. So that he doesn't exactly fit that type given his size and, you know, what he does well. But I think he's going to have a fit in the NFL. And there's going to be somebody who takes him late day 3 to probably late round 4, late round 3 to late round 4. I would say it would be in his range right now.
Absolutely. Makes total sense. And how do you think, you know, obviously he got a late invite to the Senior Bowl, being a graduated redshirt junior, big opportunity for him to be down there in Mobile this week in front of the scouts. How do you think that could potentially impact his draft stock? Obviously you talked about the interviewing. I think he like you said, he'll interview very well. Kind of depends on how he tests. How do you think being there though, you know, the Senior Bowl kind of favors defenders personally, because a lot of the stuff is one-on-one drills, which really helps. So how do you think that could potentially help his draft stock? And, you know, being around some pass rushing needy teams. I'm not, you know, specific with the 49ers and the Raiders in terms of what they specifically run in terms of a base defense, but how do you think being down at that Senior Bowl in Mobile will help him?
I think it'll help him a lot, especially since guys like Josh Allen pulled out. I was working out when I haven't heard how he did in his practices, but a lot of times those drills, especially the one-on-ones, those are catered to the defensive linemen. You know, defensive linemen are going to have the advantage because they are not going to have the double teams and the quarterback getting rid of the ball, et cetera, et cetera. You know, it's the offensive linemen here, hold up, good luck. So I think that does cater to him, and you hit those two teams actually are ones that make a lot of sense for Anthony Nelson if they do miss out on that edge rusher early. Heck, I mean, I'm a strong proponent of the old adage of you can never have enough pass rush. So even if they go past edge rusher round 1, Anthony Nelson makes a lot of sense to double dip and grab again for them. So I think he's definitely got a chance to rise. However, this is a better offensive tackle class in Mobile this year than I think we've seen over the past few seasons. So it'll be interesting to see how he holds up against them and how the stock reports go. I'm a little bit upset. I'm up here working in Iowa City at the frigid cold winter weather advisory going on up here while some of my friends are down in Mobile watching that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm in the same boat. Well, actually not with the cold as much. I live in Denver now. We're dealing with some cold weather right now, but it's not too bad. But I actually was hoping to go to Mobile until, you know, there was no Hawkeyes invited. And so I was like, well, I can't really book my travel. And then Anthony Nelson gets that late invite, and I already had some work travel booked up, so I wasn't able to make it down either, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I'll definitely be looking forward to hearing him, you know, the reports about how he did during those practices and whatnot, and obviously be staying tuned to how he does in Indy and the combine and how he does with some of those different testing drills. And kind of jumping into some of the testing drills, Noah Fant is a guy who's expected to test out of the charts. I mean, this guy is an athletic freak. We saw his athleticism on display at Iowa. I think maybe less than some Iowa fans would have liked to see. But as we saw, the emergence of TJ Hawkinson kind of overshadowed what Noah Fant could even do, because TJ Hawkinson became that guy who kind of go down the seam and catch those big-time passes from Nate Stanley. But first, to touch on Noah Fant, declared you know, a true junior, first year of eligibility from Omaha, kind of came in, I believe, as a defensive end, tight end, wasn't really sure what they were going to do, and then broke out in a big way, set the tight end record for touchdowns. What do you see for him in the NFL? Obviously, there's some concerns about his blocking, but the more I've, you know, kind of watched and stuff, he's willing to block. It's just that he's not, I would say, as good or fundamentally sound as some other Iowa Hawkeye tight ends. So what are your initial thoughts on Noah Fant as a prospect?
Well, if you're upset about Noah Fant's blocking, then you're putting him in the wrong spot, I guess is the first thing I'd say. Is he going to be a great inline tight end that it's going to function as a 6th offensive lineman? No. But if you're using him that way, then you need to fire your offensive coordinator, because you're limiting what Noah Fant brings to the table. Now, I was definitely team Hawkinson. I like both of them, obviously. But I was definitely team Hawkinson, but I got a chance to watch them all 22 in regards to Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson, and man, it's really crazy what defensive coordinators would do. First off, disrespecting the wide receivers. really leaving a lot of those guys on an island. But what they could do, just getting bodies, hands, disrupting everything they could to slow down Noah Fant. And I think that was a big reason that, not to take away from Hawkinson, but I think a big reason Hawkinson was a primary option a lot of times was because defensive coordinators on opposite teams paid so much attention to Noah Fant. But for me, Noah Fant, his inline blocking, it's fine, but really he's more of that new age tight end. I'm not sure how much you or the listeners have watched of the Indianapolis Colts this year, but you had the Colts to really kind of hammer down what I think the Hawkeyes should have done more of this year with the Hawkinson and Fant duo, as you had Eric Ebron, a guy who was their tight end, but he was more of their big slot tight end where you're moving him around as an H-back, you're isolating him with some pre-snap motion, you're running him down the seam, and just a touchdown machine. I mean, kind of exactly
what a career year. He had a fantastic year this season.
Oh, yeah. No, he was finally – I'm glad a team finally used him that way. So props to them. And obviously having Andrew Luck helps a lot, though Matt Stafford's not horrible. But, yeah, no, Ebron I think is a great fit and a low-end comp, I think, for Fant. I think Fant might actually test as a better athlete than Ebron did coming out. But Ebron, I mean, he was the guy, I think he went like 9th overall when he came out. I think he was the pick before Aaron Donald too. So sorry, Lions fans. But yikes. But yeah, and then you have on the other end of the spectrum, you have the solid, guy who offers some athleticism down the field, but really he's the guy you're going to have as that 6 offensive lineman more. He's going to be running shorter routes over the middle, the tougher routes as far as contested catches. They had Jack Doyle there, who's another underrated tight end. And that's really how I see both of these tight ends fitting in the NFL. Tight end is the position, but the NFL is so specialized nowadays, and it's college football as well, where that tight end is really, I mean, that could mean so many different things. For Noah Fant, I like to call him kind of a flex end or more of an H-back tight end type, or the big slot, if you will, where you're going to be moving him around. He's going to be in the background. He's going to be the guy that moves before the snap. Is going to make the defense have to shift around because they have to account for that guy. But also it's going to make them, because of that, they're going to tip their hand as well for the quarterback. So something that you see the Rams do a lot when they have a guy like Gerald Everett, another name thrown out there that's kind of that flex hybrid tight end where they're more receiver, but it's more about getting that big body guy with athleticism where you can isolate him outside. And if you get that matchup, you're going to exploit it. But coming back to Noah Fant overall, I think that this season there were a couple injury scares that I think might have slowed him down a little bit. I mean, he had that issue with his hip coming out of that Wisconsin game. They ran that end around with him in one of the games and he bumped his head off the turf and there was some talk about concussions. And when you got 2 tight ends like that, I mean, it's hard, even for the Hawkeyes, it's hard to get that many snaps for that many tight ends, especially when they're struggling to run the football like they want. I don't know if that's Kirk or Brian in there kind of forcing the hand there, but I see sometimes when they're getting Hawkinson and the guy like, oh gosh, who's the other tight end that uses
Nate
the blocker?
Whiting?
Yes, Nate Whiting in there. Yep. Obviously a better blocker, but at that point you're tipping your hand. You're saying we're running the football. Yep. And I get that. At the same time, I kind of question, Noah Fant, I would say is your best football player. You got to get him out there still. But again, it depends on the flow of the game and trying to run the football. And when you can't run the football, then you can't really sell the play action. At least that's what Iowa thinks. There's some stats that might suggest otherwise. But, that's a totally different discussion. But, yeah, no, I really like Fant. I think he will. I've come around full circle after watching all 22. I think he will be my tight end 1. He's going to jump out of the gym at the combine. I'm curious to see how he runs. If he runs a 4.65, I've seen some projections of a 4.75. I think he's going to run faster than that. I think it was the Purdue game. They had him on a flat route, and the different level speed took off. And we didn't see that enough this season. Granted, I think that it had partially to do with the other teams not really respecting the Iowa wide receivers so much. So I like Fant a lot. I think he's going to be a top 20 pick when it's all said and done, but I'm curious to hear how his interviews go and whatnot.
Yeah, a couple things you said there. I think the first one is the Eric Ebron comp. I've actually heard that comp before from other draft analysts, so kind of funny to hear that analysis. And you're absolutely right, like kind of a low-end Eric Ebron. That's kind of the floor is what they were saying for a Noah Fant. And I think another thing, too, is it's interesting that you talk about him as kind of a big slot receiver, and when Iowa was going to run the ball more, they put Nate Whiting in. But at the same time, no one was respecting the wide receivers for the Hawks, even though I think, Amir Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith have a lot of talent between the two. Nick Easley is a pretty solid slot receiver, but they really had an opportunity that they kind of blew there. I feel like they could have really utilized Fant and pushed him out wide and used him as that big slot or just a big receiver in general. And I mean, like you said, he's their best athlete. He's their best football player. You need to get him on the field. And then the final thing is the 40-yard dash time. I would be kind of shocked to see him run slower than a 4.7. From what it sounds like, he's beating guys in all sorts of drills in terms of foot races and that sort of thing at in Iowa Hawkeye spring practices and whatnot. So I'd be surprised to see him run below a 4.7. But I am excited to see kind of what he projects at in the NFL and where he goes in the draft. I think right now TJ Hawkinson's getting a lot of love, and I've seen even a couple draft boards with Hawkinson above Fant. But I think a lot of that will change once they get to the combine and you see kind of what type of superior athlete Fant really is.
Yeah, and again, it's just the direction of the NFL. I know that we had the Patriots kind of wear down the team with the run game and whatnot, but the NFL is getting more pass-oriented. I mean, it's just the way it is. So having guys who can be mismatch weapons, especially in the red zone, which I think people we don't talk enough about Fant, about how good he is in the red zone and how teams have to totally change how they're playing defense in the red zone. I mean, the NFL is becoming more and more about bend, don't break. And if you can get 7s instead of 3s when the defense gets compressed, that's huge. So that's something that I think that really makes Fant rise above many of these other guys. I mean, his touchdown proficiency is insane. So yeah, I think he's a guy that I would absolutely love. And if Denver is going to move to more of a passing scheme going forward, which it sounds like they might with Rich Scangarello, then the Fant, if he's there round 2, I'm sprinting to the podium.
Absolutely, especially with what I can't even say his name to be honest, but what they did with George Kittle this past season. I mean, can you imagine Fant out there? He'd be the best tight end since Shannon Sharp. I mean, I can't think of anyone that could possibly go in between there. We had Owen Daniels for a year or two. I mean,
Julius Thomas.
Oh yeah, you're right. I forgot about Julius Thomas.
Yeah.
Good call. Yeah, okay, good call. Well, it'd be fun to have him there in that offense. So next guy up I want to talk about is TJ Hawkinson. Obviously, we just talked a little bit about him again. And when talking about Noah Fant, what are your thoughts about where he kind of goes into the NFL and where you see him getting drafted at? Obviously, I'm seeing a lot of mock drafts that have him in the first round, a lot of big boards that have him in the first round. But personally, I feel like he's a guy who will possibly slip to the beginning of the second round. Wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, a lot of this is going to depend on how he runs. There's some questions about his overall top-end athleticism. But the thing about me with Hawkinson is that he's a guy that you want on your football team. I mean, the dude, it's as cliche as it is. I mean, he is a football player. The story of him, busting his lip and getting some stitches in the Iowa State game and not even missing a snap going back out there. I mean, that's a dude, and he's a tone setter out there. He makes big plays. He makes the tough plays, and he's going to go out there and do whatever you ask of him. It's going to come down to how he tests. The tight end is arguably, I would say it's obviously not as important as wide receiver in the NFL. It's not as important, obviously, as quarterback, offensive tackle. But if you're looking for a tight end or running back, you're picking straws there. So it's not a position of value in the NFL. Still, I think that what he brings as far as a run blocker and a pass catcher with his size and still growth and upside, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets picked bottom of the first round from any of those playoff teams. Selection 20 through 32. I could see Hawkinson going off the board. I don't think he has the upside that you have with Fant, especially in the pass game, but I think he has a higher floor as well. I mean, he's a guy who you compared Fant to Kittle. I think actually Hawkinson's a better comparison to Kittle. I don't think Hawkinson's going to test as athletically as Kittle did. I mean, Kittle fell because he was injured and whatnot.
Yeah, he ran like a 4.56 though in the 40, I think, when he came out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also Kittle just took souls blocking in line too. I mean, the reason that Kittle fell is because he was injured his senior year, and Iowa's pass game as a whole was really just erratic that season, unfortunately. But yeah, Kittle, I mean, we're seeing now Kittle is an all-around tight end. He's an inline guy. You can put him in the slot as well because he is such a good athlete. But I think Hawkinson, honestly, stylistically, I would say Hawkinson is more like a Kittle. Honestly, my comparison for Hawkinson is a higher end Hunter Henry, where I don't think he's going to run. He's not going to be a guy who's making safeties, freak out because he's pushing the seam route against a cover 2. But as far as a guy who can be inline, obviously consistent third down converter, and a guy that if you leave him against a linebacker, one-on-one, if you're not watching out, he can beat that guy. So I really like what Hawkinson brings. And I think people really like to talk about his blocking potential, but I think that he's still scratching the surface there. He's a guy who's still filling out his frame. I mean, he came to Iowa as a wide receiver recruit, and he's still filling out his frame, his blocking technique. Half the battle is the willingness to do it, which he has in spades. But I think as far as engaging with proper hand technique and adding more muscle and more mass to him, I think his blocking prowess is going to continue to increase. And if you're looking for a team that's running a West Coast system, a West Coast offense, especially the zone blocking scheme, yeah, he could be a very good tight end one. He's not going to be that guy that you have isolated against a linebacker, on the right side of the field, and you put all the wide receivers on the left, and then you have him run a fly route or a 9 like you would with Fant. But still, he's going to be a very versatile piece. And if you're looking for a team that wants to run the football more and have a guy that you want to function as that 6th offensive lineman, that's Hockenson to me. So I don't think in today's NFL, where it's going to be more and more pass heavy, I mean, that's how it is. The air raid, unfortunately, is old school as I am, get off my lawn. I still like running the football and good, obviously beating up offensive lines. But the game is going more shotgun, more quick pass, more air raid concepts, more spread concepts, but also more air raid concepts that I think Hockenson's value or potential isn't as high as Fant. But either way, I would love either of them in Denver, and they both complement each other very well. I think another good compliment to both of these guys would have been, and it makes more sense too, I guess, with Brian Ferentz, is you had Brian Ferentz in New England, the tight ends coach for both Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. And you have Aaron Hernandez moving around, the quicker guy, isolating him against linebackers, et cetera, moving him around. That's Noah Fant. That's how Brian Ferentz used Noah Fant. And then you have the guy who's in line, the bigger body guy, the strong guy over the middle. That Gronkowski is the role that Hockenson played. Now, obviously, Hockenson isn't Gronk. He's not 6'7", 255 pounds or whatever. I mean, Gronk, arguably the best peak of any tight end ever. But that's how I see their roles in the NFL. And if you're using them correctly, not that they can't do a little bit of both. They're both good enough they can do a little bit of both. But if you're using them to their max potential, that's how I use them in the NFL.
It's funny you bring up the Gronk, the kind of loose Gronk comparison, because I was thinking about it. Talking about someone at the end of the first round, and obviously the Patriots are coming to mind. I mean, Gronk is arguably a shell of himself. He's been battling a lot of injuries. I think there's a decent chance. There's been a lot of chatter that he may retire at the end of the season. Who knows what may happen with that? But the Patriots picking at the end of the round, they have a relationship with Brian Ferentz. There could be an opportunity there for T.J. Hockenson to go in there and play for the Patriots and be that kind of guy that as we saw against the Chiefs, they used Gronk as a run blocker primarily, and then when the game got going, when they needed someone in the fourth quarter, they went to Gronk then. But I think that might be a good opportunity or a good spot for him if you're talking about late first round.
Yeah, I could see Hockenson as stylistically going anywhere from – then you have Gary Kubiak heading over to Minnesota, and Kyle Rudolph's kind of getting towards the end of his career. That would make a lot of sense and give, Kirk Cousins a weapon over the middle that's also a strong run blocker, and that's kind of a 2 birds, 1 stone situation because the Vikings really need to improve their offensive line. Tennessee could use a guy like that would really complement Jonas Smith, especially with Walker getting older and injured. Pittsburgh could use a guy like that. Jesse James is leaving, and Hockenson with Vance McDonald more of that flex tight end where he's more of that big wide receiver. That'd be a great fit. Seattle could use a guy like that. Houston could use a guy like that. And then unfortunately, Oakland could really use a guy like that. I could really see John Gruden falling in love with Hockenson because he's an infectious personality. And then you mentioned the Packers could be one, and also the New England Patriots. So I could see a lot of those teams falling in love with Hockenson. And it's not just the package, though. I think Hockenson is a guy who some coach, some offensive coordinator is going to love that kid because he's a football dude.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be excited to see kind of how his career progresses. And you kind of made the note about the Broncos earlier. It'd be fun to have one of those guys on there. I know there's a lot of tight ends on the Denver Broncos that have potential, but we've been dealing with a lot of injuries, and it'd be nice to get someone in there who could solidify that position for the long term. They
would be silly not to look tight end this year. This is one of it's not as top heavy as the 2016 class. 17 class, excuse me.
Yeah, Evan Ingram and like OJ Howard and
David Njoku.
Yeah, that was a good class.
And George Kittle, who ended up being the best one of them. Yeah, either him or OJ Howard. It's unfortunate OJ Howard got hurt, but yeah, I don't think it has the top talent of that class, but the amount of starters that are going to come from this class at the tight end position, late round 1 to mid round 4 is going to be really insane. I think. I think it would be silly not to take a tight end. I mean, I know you have Troy Fumagalli, you got Jake Butt, but I think Jake Butt has had 3 ACL injuries now. You took Troy Fumagalli in the 5th round. Both those guys, I'm having them compete for tight end 3 next year. Yeah, if I can take a tight end rounds 2 through 4, I'm definitely looking to do it.
Yeah, it's a great year. Hopefully we can snag that. Hopefully John Elway's listening and has that on his radar. I'm sure he does. So let's talk about another guy who could be a really good fit for a lot of different teams, Amani Hooker. I think he displayed a lot of versatility this year playing with Iowa, and I think Kirk and Phil Parker did a fantastic job of moving him around the defense, and that really allowed them to move to that less traditional for Iowa standards, the 4-2-5, having Amani Hooker playing that kind of dime backer role and moving all over the or all over the defense. So, what are your thoughts on him? To be honest, when he was kind of deciding whether to declare, I hadn't seen a lot of hype on him. There hasn't been a lot of buzz around him outside of obviously winning defensive back of the year. So I was wondering if he would even consider declare, or if he even would declare, just because of the lack of buzz and kind of hoopla surrounding him. But obviously he made that decision. I think whatever team picks him up is going to get a fantastic talent. But wanted to get obviously your analyst eyes, kind of what you're seeing from Monty Hooker and kind of what his fit would be and where you think he may be kind of ending up in the draft. I mean, you're thinking maybe late day 2, early day 3?
Yeah, that's honestly exactly where I'd have him right now. Obviously, a lot of this is going to depend on how he tests. Hooker, one thing about him is that he doesn't have incredible straight line speed. So some teams are going to be not looking to use him as much. It depends on scheme, obviously. But like as far as a man coverage guy, if you're looking for a scheme that uses a lot of man, like how the Broncos used to play before they got Fangio in here, they're going to be using more zone concepts going forward. But if you're looking to isolate him in coverage, man wise, I don't think that's his best fit, especially if you're going to have him dropping back as a single high safety in like a cover 1 look or maybe even cover 3 look. That's not his fit. But as far as a guy who can play some cover 2, maybe some cover 3, if you're having him come down and play a hook zone over the middle or kind of, that overhang big slot type, then that's something that or big nickelback type, that's something that I really would be interested in him, especially in a zone scheme, because while he's not overly fast straight line, he just glides. I think whether it be processing speed or just fluidity overall, watching Hooker has always been such a joy. I mean, I remember being at the spring game last year and watching number 27 make play after play on the ball. And like this kid is going to be a problem next year. And ended up winning defensive back of the year in the Big Ten. So obviously a really good player, but it's going to come down to his stock is going to come down to how fast he runs, unfortunately. But either way, I would be all about taking him. If you're looking for a strong safety / heavy nickelback hybrid, I mean, he's going to be a very good one. I think, bringing it back to the bowl game, you got a guy like Jonathan Abram at Mississippi State who's more explosive, but definitely higher variance because he blows coverages all the time. You don't see Hooker blowing the coverage. Hooker's got just tremendous instincts. I mean, week 1 this year, was it week 1? The Northern Illinois game, he totally baited that quarterback into that interception. And Iowa was kind of struggling offensively in that game. And after that, Northern Illinois was starting to drive, and Hooker had that interception. That was the last time we even heard from that Northern Illinois offense. So I really am a big fan of his game. If, you can take him late round 3, early round 4, I would definitely be about it. It was a little bit unfortunate to see him go as a Hawkeye fan, but I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be better in the NFL than where he goes in the draft, unless he absolutely blows up the combine and gets more credit. But yeah, I really love him. And one thing he brings that a lot of people, I guess the athleticism is obviously the biggest thing, but his ball skills and how he is always around the ball. He's a playmaker. And if you get pass rushers up front, there's a spot for you in the NFL if you can get after the football.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what are your thoughts on, so Iowa defensive backs have historically not been drafted very high. I mean, we saw Desmond King go from a potential first-round draft pick to a fifth-round draft pick, and then we saw him become an all-pro this year. Because as an Iowa football fan, you saw the kind of talent Desmond King has and had at Iowa, but he didn't test super well. His straight-line speed wasn't great. You see Josh Jackson, he was a potential first-round draft pick. I think there were some scheme fits that really didn't work well with him. Obviously, Green Bay was probably a good fit for him. He didn't test as well as you would hope, and there were some concerns about his fluidity in terms of turning his hips and whatnot. So he fell as well and had kind of an up and down rookie season. And then obviously Micah Hyde, who had a great career at Iowa, wasn't drafted as probably nearly as high as he should have been, considering what type of career he's had so far. How do you think that impacts NFL teams coming into this season or this NFL draft season looking at Amani Hooker? You're going to see a same Iowa defensive back, lots of talent, has the production, can play a lot of different positions, but doesn't necessarily test well. Do you think that helps him seeing the success that a Desmond King or a Micah Hyde has had?
I think that Phil Parker connection can only help. I mean, the success, obviously, in the NFL, these guys come in, they have pretty good ball skills. Obviously, Desmond King and Josh Jackson, great ball skills. They tackle very well. You're not getting on the field at Iowa unless you can tackle, and that's something, especially this quick passing game in the NFL. They're isolating bulk playmakers in space as quickly as they can, and if you can't tackle as a defensive back, you're going to be exposed. So that's something I think that really is important, and just their proficiency as far as what's demanded of them mentally, processing speed, et cetera, to even get on the field for Phil Parker. So I definitely think there is something to be said about the success of these recent defensive backs at Iowa, and I expect it to continue. I mean, you got guys like Hankins and Julius Brents, who he might have the highest potential of any of them. Yeah, he looks like a
crazy good.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what Doyle does with him this offseason as far as filling up that frame. But yeah, I would love Hooker, and given his skill set, the worst scenario you have is that you have a guy who's going to be a really good special teams player, and there's value in that. So he's going to get drafted. I think he'll probably go around the same area where Josie Jewell did. But, I mean, if he tests well, throw that out the window. So we'll see. But I'm definitely a big fan of him. And with the Broncos, everything comes back to the Broncos, unfortunately. Sorry, listeners that are Raiders fans or Bears fans or whatever. But as far as a team that's going to be using more zone coverage going forward, and the versatility he brings, can play that two deep safety. He can come down and play nickel. He can even play some in the box, although he's not, Derwin James in the box or anything like that. But that versatility is going to be key. So I think he's going to, no matter what, he's going to carve himself out a long career in the NFL, obviously barring injury. But he's going to be a great player, and I'm really excited to follow his career. I mean, I saw somebody release, obviously, when you're analyzing prospects, you don't want to go to the highlight tape. You got to watch the actual games to get the highs and the lows, get a play-by-play. But somebody released a YouTube clip of Amani Hooker's career highlights, and you really just get an appreciation of his ball skills and his instincts. Like I said, the guy is always making plays on the ball. He's physical at the catch point. He tackles well. And the amount of plays that it doesn't look like he should get his hands on the ball, but he just glides to where it's going, even before the quarterback throws it, is really, really quite good. So not a lot of people on draft Twitter talking about him right now. I don't think a lot of those people pay much attention to the Big Ten West, unless you're talking about maybe Wisconsin offensive line. But I think Hooker's one that's going to be rising up, and he should be. He was a phenomenal player this year. Maybe the upside slows him down a little bit. Maybe what is his exact fit in the NFL slows him down a little bit. But to me, that's not a problem. The versatility, the tackling, the ball skills, the instincts, those are all really good to me, and I would love to have him on my team.
Yeah, I mean, for the listeners that are on here, I do talk a lot about the Broncos and the Iowa connection. That's just, you're going to get that bias regardless when I'm talking about it, just because that's kind of the team that I'm following in the NFL. So a couple things you said there that I want to touch on. You talked about, worst case scenario, you have a special teams career and you're in the NFL for 8, 9, 10 years. I think of a David Bruton Jr. as a guy who carved out a really nice career as a depth safety and a spectacular special teams player. So obviously that's a pretty good floor if that's the case. And then in terms of the draft, that's Amani Hooker is a guy who, when he declared, I thought this could be a guy that Iowa or the Broncos could get as a steal in the 3rd or 4th round. And actually Sarah Bettinger from Predominantly Orange and NFL Mocks on Fansided did mock him technically to the Broncos. And for anyone who's been listening to the show for a few weeks has heard Sarah talk on here as well. He's a very Iowa biased fan as well. So obviously a little bit of reasoning behind there, which why he wants to have an Iowa person on the Broncos. But that would be fun to have Hooker in a Broncos uniform, just start increasing the Iowa presence. We have Josie Jewell, which is fantastic. Get Amani Hooker. That'd be awesome.
Well, the last draft, the Broncos were trying to bring in leaders and guys with high character and high floor, high floors, dudes who love playing football. And by all indications, Hooker fits that bill. He's not the prototypical corn-fed Josie Jewell type, but still, The dude loves to hit. The dude's a great football player, and no matter what, you're going to get some sort of production out of him. So that's exactly what you want late round 3, early round 4. So that's where I expect him to go.
Absolutely. Real quick, Nick, I want to make sure, time check. Are you okay? Because we just got done talking about the underclassmen. Are you good on time to go into talking about the seniors, or do you want to postpone that for another day? I want to make sure you're good on time.
I'm good until I have another podcast, my own podcast at 8 o'clock. So I can probably go another hour if you need me to.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I mean, just let me know. I don't, like I said, you're being very gracious, providing incredible insight, and making me realize I need to learn even more about the NFL draft. I feel like I thought I was like average for draft Twitter, and now I'm realizing I am severely below average. So I think your insight is incredible, and I'd love to keep talking about it. I just let me know when you are getting to a point where you need to stop or just want to stop because you're talking a lot.
Okay. Well, if I'm babbling on too much, please stop me because
no,
I have okay, because I can, I'm one of those people where if I have friends hanging out and we're drinking or whatever, and it's silence, I will be able to talk for hours. Like I just cannot stand silence, and I can just babble. So if I'm starting to babble, please let me know.
No, man, I'm so first I'm the same way. I mean, I can't handle silence. I just talk. And then the other thing is, here's my thing. Like, I am very entertained just listening to you talk about this. So I can only imagine people that are going to be listening to this later on are going to be very excited. So if I'm entertained, and I'm talking to you about it, and I think I follow some of these guys more closely than a lot of the people who are going to be listening to this podcast do, I think that's going to be really exciting for them to be able to hear the insight you're providing. So no worries at all. If anything comes up, I'll just keep you posted, but let me know when you do run out of time, and I'll try to get you down by 5. Well, I guess I'm in Mountain Time, so 6:30 your time. That way you're at least getting a couple minutes to yourself.
All right. Sounds good.
Cool, man. Well, let's jump into the seniors. So there's a decent sized list of seniors. I think personally, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of these guys are going to be, late day 3 draft picks, potentially priority undrafted free agents. I think Iowa gets a lot of love in the later rounds and as undrafted free agents, just because you get quality character guys, hardworking guys who are going to be in there who could be solid special teams performers. There's a large list of seniors who are, draft eligible. One to kind of run down the list, or maybe if you want, do you want to just kind of give your top 3 seniors to look for? Because I'm looking through the list. I'm thinking of Nick Easley, Keegan Render, Ross Reynolds, Matt Nelson, Parker Hesse, Sam Brinks, Jake Gervais, Jack Hockaday, who I don't think actually really has an NFL career, but he's a senior. Wanted to give him the love. And then Miguel Racino's as probably just a training camp kicker to keep the starters' legs a little bit fresh. So out of those guys, which ones would you kind of want to talk about? Who do you think has kind of the best NFL prospects out of those guys? And then even if you don't choose Nick Easley, we're going to have to talk about him just because being from Newton, I root for the kid, know his brother, really excited about just the fact that he made it to Iowa. So we're going to have to talk about him regardless, just as a forewarning.
Totally fine. Yeah, no, I mean, we can talk about all. Let's just start with Nick Easley because we're already going to talk about him.
Perfect. So what are your thoughts on Nick Easley? I know I even posed the question to you before Iowa season even began. And then I think we conveniently got a reply from his brother kind of posting some of his quickness and speed, drill times in Iowa spring training or, spring practices. And they seem to be pretty solid. When I look at Nick Easley, it's very easy to make a comparison that you're probably going to either roll your eyes at, but he fits a Patriots wide receiver bill. The short, white, quick slot type of receiver, the Wes Welker, Julian Edelman type of guy who can be sort of a kind of a running back in the sense. You're going to get 6-7 yards. You're going to be dependable and catch that ball. He's going to work hard. He'll do whatever you need to on special teams. What are your thoughts, though? Am I off base? Am I even close on that one? Obviously, I know I'm extremely biased about him, so I could be completely off on that.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I mean, the classic slot kind of wide receiver, the guy that's not really going to be pushing teams vertically. You're not going to really win too many contested catch situations down the field, like a Brandon Smith, and he's not going to be winning with pure speed like an Ihmir Smith-Marsette. But as far as a slot guy, I think Easley's going to find a niche. Is he going to be in the NFL? Maybe. I think he will find his way on a practice squad. I think he does offer that. So that's an upside. But at the very worst, he's going to be on a 90-man roster in the summer and get a chance to compete for a spot in the NFL. It's really too bad that he's graduating this year because a lot of those intermediate, over the middle kind of passes, when you have guys like Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson, a lot of those passes are going to go there, and rightfully so. I mean, those are day one NFL starters. But easily, man, if he would have stuck around another year with the tight end turnover, I could have seen his numbers just explode next season, just because the reliability factor with him and the familiarity factor with him and Stanley. As far as the NFL, I don't think he's going to be a guy. I mean, he obviously didn't get a Senior Bowl invite, a Shrine Bowl invite, that kind of thing. He probably won't be tested at the NFL Combine. I'll be interested to see what he does at the Iowa Pro Day. But I think that there will be some teams that look into him. I mean, we're seeing more and more teams use more and more wide receiver packages in the NFL, and the wide receivers are getting more specialized. You know, the X type is totally different than the Z is totally different than your slot. You have some guys who can do a little bit of both, but still, it's becoming more and more specialized with the skill set. So I think he's going to have a fit in the NFL. I'm going to be interested to see what he times. I remember his brother tagging us on Twitter with some numbers as far as 40 times and whatnot, which were rather eye-popping. And, I always want to see the electric standardized time before I trust anybody telling me what their time was. I mean, I saw Andy Isabella today was saying he was running a 4.28. I'll believe it when I see it. It's that kind of thing,
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, those numbers were both like, wow, those are pretty good.
Yeah.
Those weren't bad at all. But I know, actually, kind of funny you bring that up. I had Troy Hyde. He's a reporter for the Newton Daily News on the podcast a couple of days ago, and he, close with Easley's, talks to Nick's dad a little bit, and it sounds like he's getting some calls from some NFL teams. So, looks like they're already kind of looking into what he could potentially do for them. And obviously we're going to be paying very close attention to the pro day and what he does there. So I'm hoping I can make it out there and get a chance to watch him.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to follow him going forward, and he'll get a chance. That's the best I can say. He'll definitely get a chance. I would not be shocked at all if he was a priority undrafted free agent. Philip Lindsay was this year. That doesn't mean he's a bad football player. It's just there's other needs, other baseline requirements that teams are looking for. How much is he going to offer in terms of special teams, et cetera, that you're trying to fill out the roster there. But he's going to get a chance. It's too bad. Like I said, it's too bad that he's graduating this year instead of next year, because there would have been a real chance for his niche to really be more showcased next year, given the Iowa's transitioning. They're going to have to transition their offensive scheme a little bit next year as far as a passing game.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically going to have to rely on Amir Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith. It'll be their time to shine at this point. And yeah, I mean, for a guy who walked on to Iowa as a JUCO All-American, I think getting a shot in the NFL is pretty fantastic. So let's move on to Keegan Render and then Ross Reynolds. What are your thoughts on two first-year starters? They've obviously gotten some time on the line before that, but this is really their first years of full-time starting as Iowa linemen. Didn't get Senior Bowl invites as well, didn't get Shrine Game invites, so not a lot of buzz around them, but they're Iowa offensive linemen, and I think personally that has a lot of pull with NFL teams just because they're getting coached by Kirk and Brian, two of probably the best offensive linemen coaches in the NCAA, coming from a school that's known for producing some of that solid talent. And then even this year we've seen, Austin Blythe, who was an undrafted free agent, or I want to say maybe drafted in the 7th round by the Colts. I can't remember which one it was, but now he's, performing pretty darn well for the Rams. So what are your thoughts on those two guys and what their NFL prospects are like?
All right, can you repeat that one more time? I got a text message, my bad.
No worries at all. Yeah, so just talking about Keegan Render and Ross Reynolds, kind of what are your thoughts for those two guys, especially considering the fact that they're coming from a school that is known for producing quality offensive linemen, and even if they aren't the most physically gifted, they are probably some of the most technically sound offensive linemen, considering they've been coached up by the Kirk and Brian Ferentz.
Yeah, again, same boat as easily guys that are going to get a chance to make a roster. I wouldn't be surprised actually if one or two of those guys ended up being selected. I do think that they, like many interior offensive linemen for the Hawkeyes, are a little bit scheme dependent. I mean, these are guys that they're smaller, they're quicker, obviously Iowa runs so much zone stretch and inside zone that's just how they build their offensive linemen. So that limits them to what types of teams can take them. I mean, you saw Austin Blythe go from the Rams, or not the Rams, the Colts, who are now definitely a power scheme, a gap blocking scheme, to the Rams, who are zone stretch. I mean, hopefully Brian Ferentz has taken some notes as what the zone stretch offense could be, because the Rams have perfected that. I mean, how many zone stretches and the play actions off of that? That's that's what the Hawkeyes should be doing. Granted, when you got wide receivers like Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks, that makes a difference. But no, I think those are guys. They have upside as far as the blocking, but with how Iowa's offensive line this year struggled to really get a push up front, I do worry about their limitations when they go one-on-one to be able to uproot and move a guy when needed. The defensive line or defensive linemen are getting bigger, faster, stronger every single week, every single year. It seems like. I mean, it's gonna get worse this year because this might be one of the best defensive line classes in a long time. So there are some questions about their upside and their schematic versatility, but given especially Keegan Bender, a guy who's played center, which Iowa puts a lot on those centers' plates, and also the success of James Daniels, who's played center for Iowa in the NFL already. And they're Keegan Render and Ross Reynolds. There'll be some demand for them. Will they get drafted late 6th round, 7th round, undrafted free agent type, I would guess, just because the upside isn't tremendous. But again, you're getting a high floor. You're getting a guy who's going to come in. He's going to pick up the scheme pretty quickly, especially if you're running his own blocking scheme. And he's been doing it. You have to do it at Iowa. So those are guys I could see getting a chance there. And I wouldn't be surprised if both of them were kicked around on some practice squads for a little bit. Those kind of guys, because they're valuable there. You got to have those bodies.
Yeah, like the James Ferentz type, the kind of guy who's just been bouncing around. He got a Super Bowl ring with the Broncos. Now he's on the Patriots. So pretty cool stuff. The one thing you mentioned that I wanted to bring up is, getting pushed around and not getting that big push on the line. And I think we saw that against Mississippi State, against some very NFL caliber type of defensive linemen. They destroyed Iowa up the middle a few times. Iowa, I believe, had negative 15 yards rushing or negative 11 yards rushing. The offensive line could not do anything against them. And it was not just edge pressure. It was right up the middle. I mean, Nate Stanley, God bless his soul, was able to hang in the pocket and did a pretty solid job considering the amount of pressure that was in his face on a consistent basis. So, you saw a very good example of them going up against NFL talent and not really, performing at a very high level. But I think that is really good comparison about just the idea of being able to get on a practice squad and kind of bounce around a little bit.
Yeah, that's probably their upside. So, probably where they'll start at. But that being said, they went up against Mississippi State. Jeffrey Simmons is a top 10 level talent in the upcoming draft, and it showed. So, yeah, he was not a surprise.
He was insane. So, kind of jumping around from Jeffrey Simmons to the defensive line of Iowa, we have 3 seniors played together for a while. We have Matt Nelson, Parker Hesse, and Sam Brinks. When I look at this group, to me, I don't know if Sam Brinks is really NFL quality necessarily. I think Parker Hesse is a very hardworking, but he's kind of an undersized, not exactly the kind of guy who's going to make a huge difference on a team. And then I think Matt Nelson is pretty intriguing just because of how tall he is and the fact that he was playing that defensive end position, but got moved into defensive tackle. Obviously, the numbers kind of dropped a little bit, but I think there's a little bit more versatility and potential with Matt Nelson than you would have with Parker Hesse and especially a Sam Brinks. What are your thoughts on those 3 guys?
I can't disagree. The thing with me with Matt Nelson is that he might be too tall, which I know. So bear with me here, but the NFL, the inside game, especially with defensive tackles versus interior offensive linemen, the low man wins. It's great to be long. It's great to be tall, but leverage is everything. And he does a pretty good job with knee bend. He's not an overall freakish guy, but there's a reason you don't see many 7-foot tall nose tackles in the NFL. Those guys that big, you're going to get guys at your legs. You're going to be on the ground. You're going to lose the leverage battle. You're not going to have great balance. So there's something to be said about his body type. I do like the length. I do think he has the ability to occupy multiple gaps in that regard. But when he's taking on double teams, we saw it against Wisconsin, he was driven back. And that has partially to do with, just his body size. He's not a 320-pound guy, despite that, 6'7" frame. He's going to have to, and he does a good job. He reworks the offensive line, defensive line. He'll reset his hands, he'll reset his feet, he'll shuffle them to reestablish that anchor. But I think that at some point, being that tall works against you because you are automatically at a disadvantage in the leverage battle, which is everything as it comes to trench play. That said, he's a guy who's been moved around, very smart kid, obviously. I think he got into medical school I
Yeah,
believe that's
he
true.
said in an interview that his goal was once he's done playing, if he has an NFL future, he's going to med school and he wants to be a doctor. And not
Yeah.
just your regular Joe Schmo family practice doctor. He wants to be like an orthopedic surgeon or something.
Yeah. So smart kid, that's definitely going to be a story, and he's going to come in there and work hard. The athletic upside, I mean, I wouldn't say it's super high. He did have that amazing sack against Iowa State this year, which was fun, but those type of defensive tackles, pretty much if you can't get after the passer consistently, you're going to fall down the draft. I mean, there's nose tackles, but the day of the hog mollies up front that just eat blockers and free up the linebackers and stuff the run, their value's pretty much dead. So, I mean, those guys, you're seeing them fall to where they used to be second or third round picks. You're seeing them go fifth, sixth, seventh round, even undrafted. So not that he's just not, I don't think he's the juiced up type of pass rusher that will see teams value. That said, the character, the versatility, I think he has the ability to play some one technique, even some three technique and a heavier base sets. That's something that teams will like, as well as the personality and the character. I actually think if I'm picking Parker Hesse first. He's a guy that there are some questions about the size, the length, the athleticism. But as far as an edge setting base guy who has also a little bit of ability to work out in the flats and coverage, offer some versatility there, I think he's a pretty solid player. And when you're getting overshadowed by the likes of Anthony Nelson, especially AJ Epinesa, you're going to not look as good. But I really think that, I mean, he again is a guy who could go 6th, 7th round, maybe undrafted. But I think there's some versatility there, especially when you saw him kick into three technique when the Hawkeyes used their, I don't know what did they call their light package?
It's like it's not NASCAR package. I can't remember. That's what the Broncos call it.
It's essentially a NASCAR package.
Yeah, I mean, because like they have AJ Epinesa, they have Chauncey Golston, they have Anthony Nelson, they have Parker Hesse, and it's just let's kill the passer.
Yep, essentially. I mean, they're giving up anchoring ability against the run to get penetration and disruption to the backfield, which, I mean, that's what you want. So I think Parker Hesse is another guy that probably around the same value as Matt Nelson, but I lean to him a little bit more because, it's about getting after the quarterback. You can't be a total liability against the run, but it's about getting after the quarterback. And Parker Hesse is one of the best. I mean, I would argue he was our best edge-setting player last year. I mean, that's one reason that he started so much over AJ Epinesa, who, I mean, while his flashes were incredible, his ability to consistently set the edge and not get too much depth up the field or work back inside or work too far outside. I mean, Parker Hesse was consistent holding that edge. He'd beat that guy and he'd be there and force them back into help or not let them kick out. So I think that Hesse is another one that I value pretty highly, higher than what I've heard from draft Twitter and whatnot. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets picked. Probably I wouldn't bet on him being picked 6th, 7th round because he doesn't have much special teams upside, growth upside, et cetera, but you're going to get a solid player.
Absolutely. And then I think we could probably close the door pretty quickly unless you feel like it's worth exploring. But I think Sam Brinks his career is probably done. Would that be an accurate statement?
He might get a chance to be a coach.
Okay.
But I don't see him in the NFL. No. Same with Hockaday. The last guy that probably on the senior group, obviously Racino's, you touched on him. I'm not going to go too much into kickers because
that's totally fair. I don't think
honestly,
anyone really cares.
Good luck to him. I mean, Nate Kading's the dude still, but if Racino's can do some stuff in the NFL, that'd be amazing. But I think Jake Gervais is another one who'll have a chance in the NFL. Again, undrafted free agent, guy in the 90-man squad that is fighting for a spot, the preseason game 3, preseason game 4, et cetera. But another guy that offers some versatility as special teams, and he's shown that he actually can play some single high. I don't think he's athletic enough in the NFL to do that. If you leave him back there, he's not going to be able to cover enough ground. But coming downhill, solid tackler, solid instincts, a guy that was a leader for that team for sure. And if he makes a team, that'd be amazing. I think he'll probably be one of those ones that he'll get a couple of chances to make some teams as a young guy. Then unfortunately he's cut down. That's just kind of where I see his value, his range, but good player. And I think he'll get a shot as well. I mean, if you're playing football, especially with how Iowa's started to, I mean, they've always been a developmental program, but their recruiting has gone up recently as well. And the talent level has increased, et cetera. Thank Chris Doyle, thank Kirk running the stable program, maybe even thank all the Big $10 that are coming into Iowa and this new indoor facility and the robot quarterback, whatever the heck that thing is. But I think Iowa's definitely a program, and the Big Ten as a whole are trending up as far as talent, and that's good for the league and good for draft analysts like myself.
Yeah, and I think, pretty impressive regardless, just even getting to the NFL. Travas, I believe, was a walk-on. So, and I mean, he had some struggles bouncing in and out of the starting lineup earlier in his career. So he had a really good rebound season. I believe he was honorable mention all Big Ten. So either way, just a fantastic conclusion to his career, and played a big role in the Outback Bowl. Pissed me off a few times, dropped an easy interception, and then arguably a potential interception, but came back big with that interception in the end zone. So all is good in my world with him. But I'll be excited to see kind of where he goes.
Yeah, so and he's a Davenport dude as well. So got to give him some props, like me.
Oh yeah,
although he's Assumption. Assumption's not my favorite. I'm a public school kid.
Were you Central or North?
I was actually North. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Yeah, we played Central before in high school, so they had was it Zach Kenyon was the guy? There's a couple pitchers who could throw about 90, 95 and got drafted out of that area. But I digress. All right, so Nick, we wanted to touch on, we talked a little bit about this before the show, but I think that kind of covers it for the guys who are draft eligible this year. But I think one of the things that's really interesting and no one's really talking about is the potential for a mass attrition next year when we have Nate Stanley, who's going to be graduating. We have AJ Epinesa, who is, he is going to be a top 15 pick, probably. We have Alaric Jackson and Tristan Wirfs, who, have some up and down play, I think, throughout the last 2 years. They're still young, though. And again, they're growing in that Iowa offensive line scheme, learning from Kirk and Brian Ferentz. But they have a ton of talent. They're very their size is very NFL type of size. And then we have Geno Stone and Matt Hankins in the secondary. We saw Stone emerge this year playing that third safety role because of Iowa's move to that 4-2-5. And then obviously we saw what Hankins can do and what happens when Hankins isn't in the lineup. I think the best case about that, or the best example of that, was the Purdue game where Iowa got lit up by Purdue's number 3 wide receiver who had about 4 catches all year. So we could see kind of what happens when Hankins wasn't playing. So I wanted to get your thoughts first on Nate Stanley, his kind of the floor and the ceiling. I mean, there was some talk about him being a first rounder even this year. I think there's a lot to improve on for him. I think accuracy is a big thing. I think decision making is another one. He usually has about 1 to 2 throws a game where you just want to literally shake him and be like, what were you looking at there? So I want to get your thoughts first on Nate Stanley.
Well, if Josh Allen going, 7th overall last year, 8th overall, taught me anything, it's that the NFL will take tools every time. Now, I'm not saying Nate Stanley has tools like Josh Allen. Josh Allen is probably the closest thing to Cam Newton since Cam Newton. But Stanley is a guy with a big frame. He's got a pretty solid arm. It's not, Drew Lock, Josh Allen level, Matt Stafford level, but he's got an above average arm, and he can make those throws. And also he's got work under center in a pro offense. I don't think his reads are as complex as many say, pro style offense. I don't see him going through like crazy reads where he's a full field reads, so to speak. A lot of more deep middle check down kind of thing, 1, 2, 3. But yeah, I think Stanley's a guy that he's going to get a chance to be a starter in the NFL. And I know a lot of people like to reminisce about CJ Beathard. He's definitely got the bigger personality, the more, smile and get on my back kind of guy. But Nate Stanley is, if I'm picking a quarterback to start an NFL franchise, if I had to pick between them, I'd pick Stanley. Stanley's got way better arm talent, and he's just a more prototypical passer. I do love how big and strong he is in the pocket, but I do think, you talk about the touch, the accuracy, the base, it's got to get more consistent. That's for sure. But the main thing I want to see him do next year is just be much more subtle and advanced and in his movement in the pocket. A lot of times he would step, especially when I watched some of the All-22, he'd step in ways that would not help himself. Tom Brady is not a great athlete. I mean, he's definitely not a great athlete anymore. But the way he can subtly move around the pocket and just take small steps to create different windows to give his offensive line time, it's a world of difference, and something that Stanley is really far away as far as his pocket ability. I'd also like to see him speed up his mental clock, his processing ability, get from those reads quicker, don't stick on the first read too long. But also, if he needs to be able to see a guy breaking open. Sometimes I'll see a guy where he has that primary read And the guy comes open the second after Nate Stanley gets off the read. So it's not just seeing if the guy's open, it's seeing if he's going to be open, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, so that's the big thing. I do think that the tools are there. He's really tough in the pocket. I mean, he's had some crazy highlights where guys are draped around him and he's running around and he's big and strong. I mean, he's hard to take down. There's no doubt about that. But It's just as far as the processing, the consistency with his base and movement in the pocket are the big things I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Indiana game was a really good example. Obviously, he had a career game there. I believe he received a National Player of the Week award after that one, but he was chucking guys off him. I mean, people were draped around him, and he was still managing to look down the field and throw the ball. And I mean, he delivered a strike too easily as a touchdown with a couple guys draped around him. So pretty impressive overall. But I 100% agree with everything with what you're saying. I think there's a lot of potential with him, but I think this will be a really huge year for him. How much progress does he make from his junior to his senior year? I'm glad he came back. I think it's best for obviously his career and for the Hawks. I mean, they have a lot of talented quarterbacks behind him, but I'm excited to see what Stanley can do in year 3. That being said, I even talked about this earlier in the season on Dear Old Gold, but one of the things that I kind of noticed is that there seems to be some sort of regression with Iowa quarterbacks when they go into their senior season or their final year, or they have a big year and they come back and they're just it's a statistical regression. There's kind of a general play regression. We saw CJ Beathard have a decent year when he led Iowa to the Big Ten championship game, and then the following season, it's just nothing could get going. And I think that's partly because it was CJ Beathard, and partly because there was really no one on offense who could stretch the field or really do much for him. But again,
he was hurt. He was really hurt.
Yeah, especially against what was it the Outback Bowl where he went against Tennessee, or the Tax Slayer Bowl against Tennessee, and he wouldn't come out of the game, but he could barely freaking move. So tough all around. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how Nate Stanley progresses from this season to next season. A couple other guys we want to touch on. I think we could talk all day about AJ Epineza. Just a quick 1 or 2 minute spiel on him. What are your thoughts on him? I think the big knock on him right now is his run defense, and he needs to get better against the run, which is, as you talked about Parker Hesse, a big reason why Epineza wasn't playing as many downs as some fans who don't really see the whole game were saying he should be. I mean, he played about 25 snaps. He was very, very effective in his snaps, but he needs to get better against the run. So what do you think he needs to improve on to really solidify that top 10, top 15 status?
Well, he is an absolute freak, and I would be shocked if he wasn't a top 10 pick next year. That being said, I am a little bit concerned about the defensive line depth for the Hawks next season. I mean, they're losing a fair amount of guys up front. There's some transfers and some guys quitting football as well, and guys leaving early. So that'll be interesting. And obviously, if he plays, a huge amount of snaps this year, he's not going to be as effective as on a per snap basis. Great NFL teams, great any teams, have great defensive line depth. I mean, that's something we saw Alabama this year in the national championship. They have a great defensive line, but they did not have a great depth or rotation of guys. And then once Clemson started getting going, you saw them get real tired and they started losing their effectiveness. So that's a big thing for me, is just seeing if he can handle the bigger workload, be more consistent, still be, I mean, I don't think he's going to put up the sack per snap that he had this year. If he is, he's going potentially first overall. But I think that's a big thing. And also I'd like to see him just string some moves together. I'd like to see some rip moves. I'd like to see some swims. He has a really good bull rush. I mean, we saw Max Sharping, left tackle for the Northern Illinois Huskies. He talked about guys that he went up against this year. He went up against Brian Burns, who many people think is going to be a top 10 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Sharping held up against Burns, and there was an interview with Sharping too. He asked, is Burns the best guy you went up against this year? And he said, no. That kid from Iowa is unbelievable. And I like to call Max Sharping AJ Epinesa's son, because AJ Epinesa put him on his butt a few times. So, yeah, I mean.
As he did against a lot of Big Ten tackles this year. I mean, he was throwing guys all over. I mean, he put one of the Wisconsin tackles on skates a couple of times. I mean, it was fun to watch him. But, yeah, I'm really excited to see what he can do. Obviously, as you said, we can't really expect those the sack per snap numbers that he had this past season, playing 25 snaps, leading the Big Ten in sacks and being top 10 in the nation. But I still think even with teams double teaming and stuff like that, he'll still be able to produce some pretty good numbers. And either way, the guy's an athletic freak who can really make a difference on the defensive line.
Yeah, there's just not many guys ever at the University of Iowa that have had his height, weight, speed, athleticism, overall package. I mean, he's listed at about 6'5", 270, 275 pounds. And the amount of force he creates at the point of attack when he creates contact and the length he plays with, his ability to keep guys from just getting clean hands on him is special. The raw tools are special. I mean, you're talking about a franchise level pass rusher in the NFL. But it's just, keeping to add good muscle. Chris Doyle will be on that for sure. And stringing moves together and just being more consistent about his pass rush plan, setting guys up as well. I mean, you saw Von Miller. That's something he learned from DeMarcus Ware. He's like, you don't have to use your best move every time. You need to learn to like set guys up so that way on that 3rd and 10, when you need to get that sack, you've set them up all game long, going inside. Then you show them that and bust outside of the spin move or something. That's kind of that more refined mental game stuff that he hasn't shown yet. Granted, it's been partially because of, he is a kid still and he's had a limited snaps, but yeah, he's got really high potential. As I'm already on some 2020 stuff as far as NFL draft goes, and as far as edge rusher number 1 as next draft season goes, it's either AJ Epinesa or Chase Young at Ohio State, who is also an absolute freak, a little bit different type of edge rusher, more of that smaller twitch, pure speed guy, where Epinesa, I mean, he's not going to have issues playing either scheme because he's athletic enough and long enough and good enough that you just get him out there, forget about perfect fits. But both those guys are very dynamic. I'm really excited to watch them both next year in bigger roles.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, the depth is obviously a concern for the Hawks, but AJ Epinesa is going to be a beast, and I'm excited to watch him. And even Chauncey Golson, who flashed a little bit throughout the season in his spot play as well. He did a fantastic job. I mean, when he was on the field, he was constantly making plays as well, and he was it wasn't just pass rushing plays. He was kind of branching out, doing a little bit of flat zone coverage, that kind of stuff. So I was pretty impressed by Chauncey Golson as well. But yeah, I don't want to get into Tim, I wanted to quickly get on to Alaric Jackson and Tristan Wirfs, two guys who have a ton of NFL potential. They are huge guys, very, very, I think, highly looked at, or very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? They have a lot of potential. NFL teams are kind of gushing over their size, but I think they need to put it all together. They've had some inconsistencies over the last 2 years. They started as freshmen at tackle for the Iowa Hawkeyes, which is not something that happens very often in the Iowa football program. And they've built on that. They've gotten better, but there's still those inconsistency flashes. What do you think they need to do to potentially be talked about in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round of next year? And do you think that's even a possibility?
I think it's possible that both those guys could bolt for the NFL. Alaric Jackson, both of them have already actually had some incidences off the field, or academically off the field, et cetera, where they've missed some playing time. So it wouldn't be surprising to see if those guys bolt at their opportunity. I'm taking Tristan Wirfs over Alaric Jackson. I always thought that Tristan Wirfs was more of a natural left tackle, and I think he is the guy with the higher upside, the higher ceiling as an overall player. I mean, he's actually, you're talking about both them starting as freshmen and sophomores. Jackson has another year on Wirfs in the program. So Wirfs will be a true freshman next year, or a true junior next year, whereas Alaric will be a redshirt junior. So the fact that he's able to come in his freshman season and play like he did, I mean, the only other person I can think of playing tackle for Ferentz as a true freshman is Brandon Scherf. So that's
pretty good company.
Yeah, exactly. Wirfs, looking at his body size, you'd think he'd be a more dominant run blocker than he is, but really it's his pass blocking that really sets him apart. And people are a little bit worried about losing the tight ends next year, but if you got those bookends like the Hawkeyes have in Jackson and Wirfs, and bringing 3 solid wide receivers back, I'm actually pretty excited about Tyrone Tracy playing that slot role. I think that you'll be fine. But yeah, I like both these tackles a lot. I think Alaric Jackson, if the talk is true that he's just much more comfortable with his left hand, that's why he's at left tackle. I wonder how much that's going to affect him in the NFL, because I don't know his overall athletic upside at that position as a blindside blocker. He's a little bit more lumbering than Tristan Wirfs is, and skill-wise, he makes more sense as a right tackle because he's going to be working with more double teams, et cetera, on that side. And he's obviously the blind side matters. Not as much as it used to because teams are moving around their edge rushers to isolate guys and find matchups, but still that matters. So I'm curious about his talks. I can't confirm for sure because I didn't say him right tackle, but talks that he's much more comfortable with left tackle than right tackle, how much that's going to affect his stock. But I think Wirfs is the guy that is the more talented of the two, that if he has another good season next year, takes another step forward, he could definitely be a guy that's in the talk for a first round pick, if not, top 60.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see. And I'll try to like see if I can get any more information on the left hand thing. I think that's a really interesting take that I haven't really heard yet. But if that is the case, like you said, that'll be interesting to see how that translates. That really makes him kind of inflexible to be able to move around. And is he a true left tackle in that sense? So,
yeah, that's something like prototypical skill set wise. Tristan Wirfs, with how smooth he is as an athlete, as a pass blocker, he's more of your prototypical left tackle in my eyes. And I would have Wirfs at left tackle with Jackson at right tackle. But apparently, I mean, it's not that simple. Obviously, the technique is different. It's like you learn how to do everything right-handed, and then you have to learn everything left-handed, writing. I mean, it's not as simple as plug it in, playing, and switching guys around in Madden. But I think skill-wise, it makes more sense. And it comes down to if it is true that Alaric is just so much more effective at left tackle, obviously getting the best 5 out there. But I think that will limit his demand and his value at the next level, because I just do not know if he has the foot speed and flexibility in his waist and resetting his knees, bending his knees, etc., to be a true left side tackle in the NFL.
Makes sense. And then to wrap it up with the other two guys we talked about a little bit before the show that you brought up was Geno Stone and Matt Hankins. And we saw Geno Stone played really well this season in that third safety spot, good enough to get all Big Ten honors. He had 4 interceptions, tied for the team lead, really showed his ball hawking abilities. And then Matt Hankins, kind of that shutdown corner. What I was most impressed about with Hankins is not just his coverage, but his ability to tackle in the open field. I believe it was against Iowa State. He took down a 240-pound tight end, and he was the only guy left standing between him and the end zone. And really impressed me. And you talked about this a little bit earlier with Amani Hooker, but his tackling is fantastic for a defensive back. So wanted to get your thoughts on those two guys. What would need to happen? Because, I mean, I think with Josh Jackson and Desmond King, they got a lot of hype when they went out for the NFL draft. Desmond King had 8 or 9 interceptions or something ridiculous. Josh Jackson had some sort of similar stat line with a lot of interceptions, got a lot of buzz and hype for the NFL draft. Hankins doesn't have those high interception numbers. So what are your thoughts on Stone and Hankins as potential defensive backs at the next level?
Well, I think both have very high upside. Geno Stone might be one of the most athletic safeties the Hawkeyes have had in a while. And I don't think you're going to play him in the same role as you played Hooker, where he's playing that hybrid safety linebacker cornerback role, that star as they called it. I think you're going to see another guy kind of get a chance there. Maybe Merriweather, that's somebody who's been given some hype in that role. But yep. I like Stone a lot as far as that deep safety, whether it be cover 2 where he's the strong safety, maybe even a look at free safety, his range back there, his ball skills. I mean, we saw a little tidbit of it against Penn State where he returned that one back for a pick 6. He's physical coming downhill. So I think Stone has very high potential, and I wouldn't be surprised if he took a big step next year and as another guy who could leave early. And then I also really like Hankins a lot. He battled an injury this year, and also I believe he got in trouble with a disorderly house when the Purdue game or the Penn State game, one of those games. That's something to monitor as well, because I know Kirk runs a tight ship, so that's always something to watch. But Hankins really impressed me in the Iowa-Mississippi State game where he was up against, obviously some really good SEC talent. Mississippi State, not really a great team throwing the football. Nick Fitzgerald is a Costco brand Tebow, but still, he had a really good game, really tight coverage, and I like the versatility shows. I don't think he's a pure zone guy. I think he's definitely got more versatility than we've seen from some Hawkeyes cornerbacks in the past, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy whose arrow is trending up, and I really hope that we can see both him and Brents next year on the field, because I think those are your most talented cornerbacks. Although Ojemudia, solid tackler, good coming downhill, a little bit stiff. That's an issue. He got exploited in Wisconsin for that regard. Not great change of direction ability. Maybe he's going to be the guy who plays that star role. I don't know. We'll see. If there's anybody I trust on the Iowa staff, it's Phil Parker. So we'll see back there. But
he'll get the best guys on that secondary. And there's a lot of talent there too. The fact that Kayvon Merriweather blew his red shirt or his opportunity for red shirt, they still have Dallas Cradith, who was kind of the big guy coming in. There's a lot of talent there, the safety position and the corner position. And I know a lot of people are down on Riley Moss, but give the guy some slack. He was a gray shirt, freshman, walk on, having to start in Big Ten football. Clearly not. He made some good plays Definitely not ready to start right away, but
Definitely not.
another very talented player who's also there that they have as a fourth corner. And you can see the amount of talent they have just by how many people are leaving the program. I believe they've lost 2 or 3 cornerbacks over the last month to transfers because they're just not going to get a chance to play because there's that much talent there.
Yeah, I agree. So gotta trust Phil Parker, and man, I'm really excited to watch the progression of Julius Brents, and I really hope that we can get both. I hope we can get him on the table or the field more this season because his upside is as good as any Iowa defensive back that I can remember. I mean, his length is he looks like Slender Man out there as he continues to fill up that frame, and he looks like he's aggressive back there. I mean, he's one of those dudes who can scratch his knees without bending over. So I'm excited about him just going forward, and I'm really hoping that we can get him on the field more because he is a great talent. But if he's not working in the weight room, not that he's not, but like he's going to have to be putting in the work well because Phil Parker is going to make you have to know the playbook, you have to be able to fill in, you have to be busting your butt, otherwise you're not going to see the field. So that's a good thing, not an issue at all. But
you got to love that about the Iowa Hawkeyes. They are not going to give in to whatever your status is, how much talent you have. You need to be just as hardworking as the guy behind you that's a walk-on who may never have a chance to play. You better be working just as darn hard, otherwise you're not playing either.
Yep.
I love it.
Last guy I want to touch on before we get out of here, actually.
Oh, perfect. There's another guy. Awesome.
Another guy that wasn't really sure what his exact role this season. You know, is he going to be playing that outside kind of linebacker like his brother? But Nick Niemann.
Yeah.
Yes, he is a guy who flashed a lot down the stretch. I really liked his length. He's a guy who needs to keep adding weight. You know, 6'4", 220, 225. He needs to add another 10 pounds, 15 pounds or so. But I really think that he's got upside, and I really like the way he was playing in that Mississippi State game coming downhill. Him and also Colbert, both good linebackers, definitely more athletic than what Iowa's typically had at that linebacker position. So he's one that I'm really excited to see what type of step he takes next season.
Yeah, I wrote actually. There's a couple articles I had about Nick Niemann. He never necessarily filled up the stat line. He was injured a few games, but when he played, that guy flew to the ball and he was all over the place. And you could tell the difference that when he was in the game. And Digimon Colbert, I don't know if I said his first name right, but Colbert's outstanding too. I mean, I think coming into the season, obviously linebacker was a big weakness. This season was a little bit tough because there were so many injuries and people being out and whatnot. But with Niemann and Colbert, they have a pretty solid foundation at linebacker. And I'm excited to see what Nick Niemann can do next year because I really did love watching him play and how quickly and how well he flew to the ball. He obviously, like you said, he has that background. His brother, Ben, played for Iowa. He's now with the Chiefs. So has that pedigree and has that, knows what needs to happen to make it to the next level. So,
yeah. And also watch out for McDonald and Doyle's son as well. So, I mean, Iowa's switching to a more 4-2-5. They probably have to because how many teams play spread in their division? You need to get more speed out there. And I love that star as kind of a compromise between getting more speed but still having the ability to, hunt down those screens, take on those blockers, be good in space as a tackler instead of going with, 3 cornerbacks. But it'll be interesting to see how the defense evolves as the landscape of college football evolves.
Absolutely. And real quick, can you imagine being Doyle's son? I can't imagine being Dylan Doyle. I mean, your dad is the best strength and conditioning coach in the nation, and you are his son. I mean, can you imagine how hard he'd have to work in just even in high school? That would be tough.
Yeah, but at the same time, pretty much a shoe-in. I mean, obviously, you still had to do the work, but you got your foot in the door in the Iowa program, and let's say football doesn't work out for you, you probably got a career there as well.
Oh, I mean, yeah, his dad created quite the legacy. It'd be fun to see kind of that, transition or that legacy passed down. But hey, Nick, while we were talking about Nick Niemann, but hey, Nick, I really appreciate your time on the call today and appreciate all of your insight. I mean, loved talking to you about the Iowa Hawkeyes. I know you're a busy guy. You have your own podcast. You have a lot of your writing and stuff, and you also have your full-time job. So appreciate your time today. Anything else you want to say before we end the discussion?
Nothing really. Just the Broncos better figure out this quarterback situation, otherwise I'm gonna lose my mind talking with some of these fans.
I see some of your replies, and I truly enjoy it. It is